Woman, hear me carefully. The moment God calls you, he calls you away. He does not call you into the crowd. He calls you out of it. He pulls you from the very places where your heart once rested, the people you thought you could not live without, the attachments that once defined your security. Why? Because destiny cannot grow in the soil of dependency. God said you will lead many out of darkness, but before you can lead them, he must first lead you out. There is a reason you feel a distance. There is a reason relationships shift and attachments dissolve. Do not mistake it for abandonment. It is an announcement. It is the announcement that you are being positioned for influence. Detachment is not God punishing you. It is God preparing you. The same hand that closes the doors behind you is the same hand opening the path ahead of you. You see, leadership is not proven by how many follow you when life is comfortable, but by how steady you remain when you must walk alone. Emotional detachment is God's way of saying, daughter, your confidence must be in me, not in them. Your strength must flow from purpose, not from approval. Your heart must rest in truth, not in attachment. A woman who is ruled by attachment cannot lead. She can only follow. But a woman who is free can carry light into the darkest rooms and command shadows to flee. Think about this. When God wanted to use Esther, he removed her from her people and placed her in the palace. When God raised Deborah, she did not depend on the affirmation of men. Her authority came from the Spirit of God. And when Mary was chosen to birth the Savior, she was misunderstood, criticized, even isolated. Yet in their detachment, their destiny was born. So do not curse the distance, embrace it. It is the womb of your leadership. Woman, you will lead many out of darkness because you are no longer chained to it. You cannot pull someone from the pit if your emotions are still buried in it. God had to detach you so that when you speak, your voice carries the weight of freedom. When you walk, your presence commands respect. When you lead, others follow not because you beg them, but because they see a light in you that cannot be denied. Confidence is not born from those who clap for you. It is born in the wilderness where nobody sees you, nobody supports you, and yet you still believe. That is where God forms his leaders. That is where he separates his daughters. The distance you feel is not a loss. It is a divine promotion. You are not empty. You are being filled. You are not forgotten. You are being prepared. Woman, remember this truth: light cannot mix with darkness. The oil of your influence cannot be poured into contaminated vessels. That is why God had to separate you, is why he taught you emotional and spiritual detachment, because he is raising you as a leader who will not compromise, who will not bend under pressure, who will not depend on the applause of men. You will lead many out of darkness because God has already led you out. Separation is never comfortable. It is always necessary for transformation. When God places his hand upon a woman, the very first thing he does is not to surround her with a crowd, but to separate her from it. Separation is preparation. It is God's way of creating a space where distractions are silenced and dependence on human approval is dismantled. Many women confuse separation with rejection, but rejection comes from men, while separation comes from God. When the hand of heaven rests upon your life, he will begin to pull you away from circles you once thought were permanent. Friendships may shift, relationships may weaken, and attachments that once defined your comfort may suddenly feel unstable. It is not punishment, it is positioning. God cannot entrust you with leading others out of darkness if you are still tied to the same sources that keep you in it. Before you can be a guide, you must first be guided away. Before you can show others the path, you must first walk it alone. Separation is not about isolation for the sake of loneliness. It is about divine preparation for the sake of destiny. Think of Abraham. God said, Leave your country, your people, and your father's household, and go to the land I will show you. Why? Because destiny is never birthed in the comfort of familiarity. Separation is God's training ground where confidence is refined, vision is clarified, and strength is established. A woman who resists separation risks diluting her calling. But a woman who embraces it learns that being set apart is the foundation of influence. You cannot lead from within the crowd you are called to deliver. God removes you so he can remake you. And when he remakes you, he equips you to lead others out of the very darkness you once escaped. Your value is never measured by how many people cling to you, approve of you, or affirm your worth. True strength is born when a woman discovers that her identity is not tied to attachment, but anchored in purpose. The danger of living for attachment is that you begin to see yourself through the eyes of others, and when they leave, your sense of worth leaves with them. But when you detach, you learn that no departure can decrease your value, and no rejection can diminish your significance. God designed every woman with intrinsic worth, breathed into her by his own spirit. This worth does not fluctuate based on relationships, positions, or acceptance. It is constant, immovable, eternal. Yet, too often women tie their confidence to the applause of people, to the love of a man, to the approval of family, or to the affirmation of society. But when those voices grow silent, insecurity grows loud. That is why God teaches detachment, so that your foundation is not built on shifting opinions, but on unshakable truth. A woman who knows her value apart from attachment becomes unbreakable. She does not beg for love because she understands she already carries it from God. She does not chase validation because she knows her worth was settled before she was born. This kind of woman becomes dangerous to the enemy because she cannot be manipulated by fear of abandonment or controlled by the threat of rejection. She leads from a place of fullness, not from a place of lack. Your value is not in who stays or who leaves, but in the divine purpose placed inside of you. Once you grasp this truth, detachment becomes freedom, and freedom becomes the platform from which you lead others into their own identity and destiny. Purpose is not discovered in the noise of the crowd, but in the stillness of solitude. When God begins to reveal destiny to a woman, he often draws her into seasons where she must walk alone with him. It is in those quiet, hidden places that the voice of God becomes clear, cluttered by opinions, expectations, or demands. Solitude is not abandonment. It is an invitation into intimacy. It is the sacred environment where God shapes vision, molds character, and imparts wisdom. Many resist solitude because it feels like loneliness, but loneliness is the absence of people, while solitude is the presence of God. In solitude, he teaches you to depend on his word above all else. In solitude, he removes the noise of validation and teaches you to stand firm in conviction. A woman who has never embraced solitude cannot lead because her voice will always be drowned out by the noise of others. But a woman who has walked with God in the quiet can stand before multitudes with clarity and authority. Think of Moses in the desert, Elijah at the brook, or Jesus in the wilderness. All were drawn away before they were sent out. Likewise, when God calls a woman to lead, he first draws her into seasons of separation where she learns that purpose requires the ability to hear him above everyone else. These moments of solitude may feel heavy, but they are holy. They strip away dependency on the crowd and build unshakable confidence in God's direction. To walk in purpose is to walk in clarity, and clarity is only found when distractions are removed. A woman who embraces solitude learns that it is not weakness but power, emptiness but preparation. It is the ground where destiny takes root and begins to grow. Emotional detachment is not a sign of hardness, but a divine strategy designed by God to prepare a woman for leadership. Many mistake detachment as a lack of care, but in truth, it is an act of protection and positioning. When God begins to set a woman apart, he loosens her grip on attachments that once consumed her heart. It is not because those things were evil in themselves, but because they could not go where he was taking her. Detachment is not rejection, it is redirection. It is God's way of pulling you from the temporary so you can embrace the eternal. A woman tied too deeply to the approval of others cannot walk freely in her assignment. Every move she makes would be filtered through fear of loss or the need for validation. God detaches so that her spirit is no longer chained to people, but aligned with his purpose. When you are emotionally detached, you love without being controlled, you serve without being enslaved, and you give without losing yourself. That kind of strength makes you unshakable because your sense of worth is no longer at the mercy of shifting relationships or unstable emotions. Detachment is the process through which God trains you to see clearly. When your heart is no longer bound, your vision sharpens. You begin to discern opportunities with wisdom and recognize traps disguised as blessings. Detachment allows you to stand firm in seasons where others are falling apart because your stability is not rooted in who is with you, but in the one who sent you. This strategy is the unseen hand of God quietly shaping you, preparing you, and building resilience. It is his way of ensuring that when you lead others, you are not swayed by emotion, but grounded in divine purpose. Confidence is not cultivated in the ease of comfort, but in the crucible of challenges where everything familiar is stripped away. When God is preparing a woman to lead, he does not place her first in palaces, but in wildernesses. It is in those hidden, difficult seasons that confidence is born, because true confidence is not the absence of fear, but the presence of faith. A woman who has stood in barren places, unsupported and unseen, and yet continued to believe, emerges with a strength that cannot be shaken by circumstances. In the wilderness, you are forced to discover that your survival does not depend on human hands, but on divine provision. You learn that your worth is not attached to applause, but to the God who sustains you. This is why many women who carry great destinies often go through long seasons of silence, misunderstanding, and isolation. God uses those very experiences to strip away false securities and build a confidence that is unbreakable. Think of David tending sheep, Esther being prepared in secret, or Ruth walking through fields of uncertainty. Their greatness was not forged in moments of ease, but in hidden seasons where they had to trust when nothing made sense. Likewise, a woman in the wilderness is being trained to stand tall, not because the world affirms her, but because God has spoken over her. Confidence born in the wilderness is different. It is not loud, it is steady. It is not boastful, it is grounded. It does not crumble when tested because it was built in fire. And when such a woman rises to lead, her voice carries authority, her presence commands respect, and her life testifies that confidence formed in hidden places can sustain greatness in public places. Leadership always requires distance. A woman cannot pull others out of darkness if she is still bound by the same chains. To lead, you must first stand apart, because influence flows from distinction, not imitation. When God calls a woman to leadership, he does not merge her into the crowd. He separates her from it. This distance is not meant to create pride, but to preserve clarity. It is in that sacred distance that vision is cultivated and strength is refined. Many resist the distance because they crave belonging, but belonging can become bondage when it ties you to places God is calling you to leave. If you remain too close to what is familiar, you risk becoming entangled in the very struggles you are called to deliver others from. God creates distance not to isolate you forever, but to elevate you above the noise so you can see what others cannot, A leader must walk where others fear, think on levels others ignore, carry wisdom that cannot be diluted by compromise. Think of Noah building an ark when the world mocked him, or Joseph holding to his dream while his brothers betrayed him. Their distance was painful, but it was necessary for their assignment. Likewise, when God calls a woman to lead, he draws her out of old environments so that her voice is not drowned by the voices of the crowd. Distance does not diminish compassion. It strengthens authority. It allows you to love people without being trapped by their dysfunction, to guide them without being consumed by their darkness. When a woman embraces the distance God creates, she becomes a leader who can pull others out, not because she is above them, but because she has already been lifted beyond the chains that hold them. Light was never designed to blend with darkness. It was created to drive it out. When God calls a woman to lead, he separates her so that her influence remains pure, untainted, unshackable. Darkness is subtle. It seeps in through compromise, through misplaced attachments, through the desire to fit in. But a woman called by God cannot afford to dim her light just to be accepted by the crowd. She must remain distinct, radiant, and steadfast, because her assignment is not to conform, but to transform. When you allow yourself to mix with what God has called you out of, your vision becomes blurred. You begin to lose clarity and authority because the same chains you are meant to break start binding you again. That is why separation is necessary. It is God's way of protecting the purity of your calling. Light must shine from a higher place so it can illuminate what is hidden in the shadows. A woman who understands this truth does not fear being set apart. She embraces it as the very proof of her leadership. Jesus declared, "You are the light of the world. A city on a hill cannot be hidden." Notice he did not say a light under a basket or a lamp lost in the crowd, but a city elevated where all can see. Leadership demands that your life be visible, distinct, and unwavering. When others compromise, you remain steady. When others bow to pressure, you stand tall. This refusal to mix with darkness gives your voice authority. People will follow you not because you mirror them, but because you shine where they are blind. You lead them out not by blending in, but by standing apart as a beacon of hope, clarity, and divine direction. Woman, never forget that your journey was never meant to leave you where you started. Every separation, every detachment, every season of solitude was God's way of molding you into a vessel of light. You were not created to merely survive in the shadows. You were chosen to lead others out of them. The strength you discovered in your wilderness, the confidence you gained in your detachment, clarity birthed in your solitude are not just for you, they are for those waiting on the other side of your obedience. You are not ordinary. You are not overlooked. You are a chosen instrument. And when God says you will lead many out of darkness, he is declaring that your life will be a testimony of his power to transform. Stand firm, walk boldly, and shine without apology. For the light within you is not fragile, it is eternal. And as you rise, many will rise with you.